Sorry for the delay guys, but some college stuff happened and I was busy and was not able to upload any videos, but now that I am free, so without any delay.
Hello guys and welcome to the next part of the series of What If Issei Also Had a Persona. If you like the video, please give it a like, share it and subscribe to my channel. Now let's start the video.
Chapter 12. I do not own the Persona series or High School DxD. Everything belongs to their respected owners. All of the Phantom Thieves and their guest had expected a calm afternoon. Each of them already having their own plans in mind for the rest of the day without anything to distract them. But the people sitting in front of them, slightly deviated from that kind of atmosphere. But at least they did not make things very chaotic. Aside from the breaking and entering, ignoring the needs of government issues when it came down to reconstruction of their building, and forcing all of the former residents to move out to better areas while paying them off, it wasn't that bad. Never expected to see you all so soon, and with your leader to boot as well, it seems. As well as, a companion of his. Akira noted the 6 figures around the couch opposite of the couch he occupied himself in what he could call the meeting and or lobby area of this new building. The leader of the Grigori had himself seated on the couch in the center. Donazik was there as well, sitting to the left of the leader of the fallen angels. Rainare, Kala Warner, and Middled were all standing behind the couch, having looks that refused to make eye contact with the Phantom Thieves occupying the space at the moment. There was a completely new person though that none of them were aware of or even knew. He was introduced as Vala and was considered pretty handsome. Akira had to admit, he couldn't believe he had to mentally say that. The young man had dark silver hair and light blue eyes. He wore a dark green v-neck shirt with a high-collared black leather jacket over it. The man also wore burgundy jeans with a silver chain drooping down over them and black leather chaps with 3 bands encircling his right calf and black shoes with black buckles. Throw in the fact that Makoto looked over to Azazel, who was just sitting casually with his back against the support of the couch. Also changed our apartments into a mansion. She was nearly at a loss for words when it came down to those final bits. Although I feel like I should thank you, there is still the issue about an invasion of our privacy and property. Oh come now, Azazel waved his hand dismissively. You managed to stop a few of my fallen angels from committing a war as well as sparing them. I had to owe you all back somehow. Plus, there was also the fact that they had gone against orders. He looked over to the 3 standing and the female fallen continued to look away with ashamed looks. That can't be the only reason why you are here, Morgana stated, getting comfortable in Futaba's lap. You would have most likely simply turned this place into a better condo rather than an entire mansion for just the 8 of us. He's got a point, Ryaji noted, sitting on the arm of the couch most of the Phantom Thieves occupied. You could have just done what you needed to do, say some stuff, and leave. But you're just lounging around the place. What's up with that? Well, I just wanted to meet the very Phantom Thieves of Hearts live and in person, Azazel admitted, looking at each and every present one with an observant look in his eyes. I certainly wouldn't have expected them to be a bunch of humans though, with all that kind of news about the changes in people's hearts. Even that Prime Minister guy was included. As the talking continued, Anne kept a bit quiet as she stared at the 3 fallen angels that had harmed Asia. Looking over to her fellow blonde, she tapped the shorter girl's shoulder and got her attention quietly. Hey, are you okay? Anne asked. Asia asked, looking up to the Phantom Thief. Seeing Anne gesture over to the 3 fallen, the girl was quiet for a couple of seconds. A few emotions ran through her face, but then she settled for a gentle smile. Yes. It looks like they have learned their lesson, so there is no need to be so angry at them. Plus, you are all here as well to keep me safe. Anne stared for a bit before chuckling and patting Asia's head. Hey, Yusuke, everything okay, man? Ryaji turned over towards the blue-haired character who was just staring at Azazel. You're really quiet right now. The boy didn't answer the blonde's question. Instead, he brought out a small notepad and pencil to move his fingers around quickly. I was just making a mental comparison to Azazel-san in front of us as well as another familiar figure, he said as he brought out an image he had just drawn up. Akira snorted after a short pause due to the picture Yuzuki had drawn. Is that Azazel with? Ryaji trailed off due to doing his best to stifle his laughter. Yes, with sensei's facial hair. Quite an amusing sight, don't you agree? Yusuke chuckled. And meanwhile was giggling. Can you imagine what he would be like in that makeup as well? Is everyone enjoying themselves? Everyone looked up and saw Haru carrying a rather large tray that everyone from Tokyo knew they never had before, carrying several cups filled with a steaming liquid and other precious bits made of fine ceramic. I've made coffee for everyone. I know how all of you like it, she nodded over to her friends before looking over to the fallen company. However, I do not know your own preferences, so that's why I left some sugar and milk on the side. You need some help with that, Haru? Ryaji asked as the heiress was still carrying the tray but began setting it down gently. No need to worry, Ryaji-kun. Haru shook her head as she began grabbing cup for each of their guests. This is for Azazel-san. Could you pass these over to Middle-chan, Kalawarner-san, and Rainare-san? Thank you, Done-Zeke-san. Here's yours as well. She passed over the cups to the following before she gently offered one to one of the silent figures of the group, Vala. Would you like some coffee as well, Vala-kun? The young man raised an eyebrow at the offer and honorific that was used but silently took the cup. Perhaps in a moment of showing good manners. Sipping the liquid, he silently hummed. It was pretty good, he had to admit. There was a complexity to the flavor but enough to satisfy greatly and not leave a bad taste in the mouth. Staring at his reflection in the liquid for a second, he noticed someone else in the liquid. Looking up, he saw Haru with a frown on her face. You seem a bit grumpy, Vala-kun. Is everything okay? She asked. He blinked before shaking his head. No. Vala stated. I was just thinking about how good the coffee was. He couldn't see it due to eye contact with the girl, but Vala knew that Azazel was wearing a shit-eating grin at the moment. A look of relief washed over Haru as she began to walk back next to her friends. Vala took a sip of his coffee again but tilted his head down to drink the liquid. Doing so managed to get him to eye the heiress, but it caused him to pause mid-sip as he watched Haru moved around. He unconsciously let out a verbal hum as he stared at her bottom until she turned around. He then turned his attention back to the coffee. Akira seemed to be the only one to notice this as he was giving Vala a weird look. All that aside though, Azazel seemed to bring the atmosphere to the meeting as everyone had a cup of coffee in their hand or on the table. The main reason I'm also here is because of your personas. There it was. The ball dropper. The one sentence to make everyone go silent in shock or realization. Honestly though, they should have seen it coming. Their personas were indeed the main reason to why the Phantom Thieves would be the point of interest after all. What about them? Akira asked curiously. Azazel chuckled, bringing his fingers up. Arsene. He looked over to Akira. Zoro. The man eyed Morgana in Futaba's lap. Necronomicon. He looked up to the orange-haired girl. Carmen. Eyes drifted to Anne finally, Johanna. The man looked at the brunette as he counted them out before placing his hands down. Did Kalawarner tell you something about Johanna being a legend? Yes, she did. Makoto nodded her head in response to the question, slightly confused to the situation at the moment. She mentioned some stuff about how Johanna was a great figure in the fallen angel community before retreating to aid Rainare-san. But there's supposed to be nothing more than stories. Legends have to start somewhere, right? Azazel only smiled in response, leaving his sentence at that. All of the Phantom Thieves looked at each other as they thought about what the leader had meant. Wait a minute. Anne was the first to react. Are you telling us that Johanna was an actual person? That's right. The leader of the fallen angels nodded his head, getting a shocked look from Kala Warner and surprise from everyone else. But, those are supposed to be legends, myths, fantasies. Kala Warner protested. Again, legends have to start somewhere. Azazel held his hands up to calm the situation down. However, there are a couple more issues I still have to go over. He dug into his jacket and pulled out a few books. Tossing them onto the table, he gestured. Take a look at them. Every one of the humans looked at each other before grabbing the books that were spaced out for them. Each of them went for a specific book though. Arsène Lupin? Akira asked as he eyed the book and opened the pages. This was made a long time ago. He noted the date it was first published. This book about Zorro is also pretty old. Morgana stated. But this book looks like it's in perfect condition. Same goes for this book about Carmen. Anne added, looking over the literature. Necronomicon is here as well. Futaba threw in her own thoughts. I think that's the case for all of us. Makoto stated, looking over the book that was in her hand. Putting down the object she stared. What is the purpose of these? You are staring at the very original copies of those books. Those are the first records of the famous tales of your personas. Azazel revealed. Those books never existed before until they appeared. Throughout the entire conversation, Vala was pretty silent. But this made his wonder actually. And what makes you say that? He asked. I have to agree with Vala-san in this case. Just how do you know in the first place? Donazik asked. Azazel shrugged. Because I've met them personally. They even left those behind as their last bit of evidence they had ever existed. What? Ryaji's question was vocalized pretty loudly as the others but Akira and Vala both didn't really react at all. The male blonde even stood up with shock. How the hell is that possible? He added as well. As Azazel winced a bit at the volume, he picked at his ear a bit. My memories of them are a bit hazy, but I am positive that I've met them. Arsène was a pretty big surprise since he first showed up when I was still a part of heaven. Zorro was rogue, helping those in need like the books say. Necronomicon was indeed an object filled with knowledge that was meant to stay unknown. Carmen was a mischievous character, certainly one of the reasons to why I fell from heaven to begin with due to loving her breasts. And pulled Asia closer to her protectively while covering her own chest. Johanna was there as well, helping those who had fallen get back up on their feet and continue to live without the heavy despair of being cast out of heaven shadowing them. Azazel finished, almost having a nostalgic look on his face. Either way, it is absolutely fascinating that such characters of history are your personas. He tapped his head. I am curious about them though. Would you mind if you would partake in some exercises I would devise? So you want to experiment on us? Akira found himself on guard just in case. The fallen angel shook his head in response. Dear God, no. I'm not heartless or cruel at all. Well, I want to run experiments with you, yes. But not in a way that you think. It's just some simple exercises and power testing. The concept of a persona fascinates me, and it makes me wonder just how vast the summoning can be and what abilities can be used. That sounds a little suspicious still. Yuzuki commented, keeping a studying eye on Azazel. Relax, I mean for the best. Azazel stood up straight. Of course there is the option of refusing if you'd like. But I could even grant you all a few favors if you do accept. He dug into his jacket again and pulled out a few sheets of paper held together by a staple. Here, I even made a contract for you guys. Akira raised an eyebrow but then took the sheets and began to look over them. All of the other Phantom Thieves peek over as well. You actually made a contract? The leader asked. I'm the guy with the big, ominous, slightly loopy organization. You're all people with interesting, nearly secret power with historical figures. Azazel shrugged. If I want your help, there has to be some form of compensation. Think of it as an act of goodwill for a foundation of trust to be built upon. Paid vacation? That's something I wouldn't expect from an offer like this. Ryaji commented. We're getting paid a lot of money if we say yes. And added. I doubt bodyguards would be necessary, however. Yuzuk voiced his own opinion. Water and electric bills being paid though would be nice. We don't know how much energy this place uses. Futaba observed. Any supplies needed but still need to pay respectful amounts. Morgana questioned. Rainare-san, Kalawarner-san, and Middled-san will have to be this residence's maids. Makoto asked. What? The three female fallen angels cried out. Vala-kun would have to live with us as well. Haru asked with confusion. What? The young man lunged forward to grab the contract before skimming the paper furiously before coming up to the point that mentioned him. Azazel, what is this? For the cool look he gave off, his current attitude was betraying his image. Come on, Vala-chan, you've been locking yourself in your room for hours and even refused to come out. The leader of the fallen angels commented. You need to get out more often, interact with more people. And I figured that you would maybe get along with the that managed to grab your attention for about a week. Vala groaned, but it was completely ignored by Azazel as the fallen angel turned to the three females. As for you three, think of it as punishment for going behind my back and creating your own business that was extremely uncalled for. But you were all meant to observe and report the movements and actions of the host of the Red Dragon Emperor. Azazel cut Rainare's protest off as Vala still looked mad but had a look of interest in his eye. But you instead chose to kill the boy and attempt to take Asia Argento's sacred gear for yourself when you were supposed to safely transport her back to headquarters after the incident with her. His eyes slightly narrowed as he didn't even bother looking at the fallen angel that was victim to the subject. As for you Kalawarner and Middled, the next two females stiffened at their names. Rather than report this, you tag along for the ride while aiding Rainare with such schemes. Azazel added. What about Donazik? He's as guilty as we are. Middled pointed out. While that is true, he truly reflected upon his actions as his punishment has already been dealt with accordingly. The leader placed a hand over his fist in a patient manner but still cracked his knuckles to show his partially true attitude to the atmosphere. You three on the other hand have yet to learn your lessons. So you are going to wait for your future to be decided by the Phantom Thieves of Hearts. I'm sorry, but can we just talk about you forcing me to move in here if they do accept this contract? Vala tried to get the attention back to him. We'll sit on it. Akira answered as everyone else seemed to nod in agreement, completely ignoring Vala. Good to hear. Azazel nodded his head. Taking out a pen, he wrote some numbers and words on the back of the contract that he snatched out of Vala's hands before handing it over to Akira. This is my number and address. If you have any questions about the contract or anything else, just give me a call. Hey, even give me a call if you're just bored. We can talk about anything. With those final words, he gestured for everyone to follow him out of the door to leave the Phantom Thieves to themselves. All of the humans Cat watched as 4 out of the 6 leaving had disbelief on their faces. As soon as they were off the property, Azazel turned to Vala. So they seem to be nice company, huh? I'm not speaking to you right now. Vala grumbled. Especially if you are going to make stupid decisions like that. Ah, cheer up, Vala-chan. The leader patted the back of the young man. They may not end up accepting the contract. But if they do, look on the bright side. At least you get to stare at that girl and drink her coffee every day. You also get to stare at her butt all you'd like. Stopping in the middle of the sidewalk, Vala slowly craned his head over in Azazel's direction. The young man suppressed the twitch of an eye as he took a deep breath to keep himself in check. I would do no such thing, he stated. Azazel chuckled. Of course. Just remember that her eyes are above the waist. Take a break. Well, you are at school early. Akira heard Sana make this observation as he looked over towards the student council president staring at him leaning against one of the walls that helped support the school. We had to arrive early to hand in the registration forms meant for Asia-san so she could transfer to this school. He answered with a shrug of his shoulders. I see. Sana nodded her head, satisfied with the answer she received. And also needed some extra time to think about the contract that the leader of the fallen angels offered to us. Akira added. Sana continued to nod her head for a few more seconds. It then immediately clicked in her head what Akira had just said. Wait a moment. So correct me if I am wrong. She said with a look that requested an explanation. The leader of the fallen angels, Azazel, visited you yesterday. Also reconstructed where we live. Akira added. And he offered you a contract of sorts. Sana continued, ignoring that quip Akira had thrown in. A hard stare was met as she turned around and gestured for the boy to follow her. Their journey was short as it was the student council room that was the destination. Sit. She ordered as Akira noticed the interior was now different with a table and couches in the center. Maybe they changed the interior every so often depending on the situation. She soon sat across the boy. Can I see that contract if you have it on you? She held her hand out. Akira thought about it. He may have looked over it himself, but Sana seemed to be much more experienced when it came down to this kind of paperwork. Even though Makoto also looked over the contract, it left Akira to wonder if there were any kinds of laws or rules that differ from humanity to supernatural. Morgana, could you shift around a bit? Akira asked the cat, getting the feline to poke his head out and moved around as Akira dug into his bag. What makes you curious about this contract of ours? Morgana asked Sana as Akira fished the papers out and passed them over to the student council president. Just what kind of offers are being made? Sana said as her eyes began to skim the words in front of her glasses. I could easily tell that the deals Rias and I offered were extremely basic, simply offering the chances of power, reduced aging, etc. But reading this contract may help me broaden my horizon of choices to offer. You really are determined to be a good leader, huh? Akira noted, getting a short nod from Sana before she remained completely focused on the task at hand. What drives you though? Why do you want your identity to be known as the one you desire in the future? Sana stayed silent, either ignoring the question or didn't hear it at all. Akira didn't press on, but he couldn't help but mentally frown at the silence he was given. This is quite the offer. Sana murmured. Azazel signed this himself. What did you do to impress him to make such offers? Apparently out personas are actual historical figures that were related to supernatural events. Akira answered straightly. Her eyes were on the paper at first, but then she slowly brought her head up with a surprised look. Azazel said that the leader of the fallen angels makes such a claim. She paused for a moment while looking away in thought. He may be right though. He was the first to fall after all. Back to the contract though. This is certainly a deal that pretty much has no way on inflicting harm upon you, unless injuries appear. A couple of warnings include broken bones, concussions and urinary tract disorders. Trust me, I have no idea how that would happen either. Akira shook his head. And yet you do not sound worried in the slightest. Sana commented. Morgana kept his head out of the bag, looking between Sana and Akira. If the cat had to comment, he saw the scene a little bit too much in his opinion, as the two would be discussing many tactics and many deals regarding serious business. Sure, there was the occasional casual conversation once in a while, but that was pretty much it. So, what are your thoughts on this, Citri-san? Morgana asked, shifting around in the bag to bring everyone back on track. I'm just wondering what kind of things must be done for broken bones, concussions and urinary tract disorders to be parts of a warning list. Sana commented. He wants to test our abilities out. See what can be discovered about them. I'm not sure what for though now that I think about it. The trickster said to himself. Sana however kept reading the contract and looked at a certain point. Any supplies needed at a respectful price? She asked, looked back up. Was it specified what kind of supplies are needed to be purchased? After a call, he said pretty much anything. Morgana answered. Perfect for us since we've run out of supplies to make out combat tools with. He then tilted his head. What makes you ask that? While I am concerned with you perhaps accepting this deal that has been offered to you, this may benefit both you and I. Sana noted, getting a look from Akira and Morgana. Those Megado bombs, they would be a very useful asset when used against stray devils or other occasions. As well as, perhaps a few other creations that are available. Both the human and cat just stared at Sana. The words she spoke began to slowly come to terms in their brains. So let me get this straight. Morgana started, processing the message behind the devil's words. You want us, to make you explosives. The very objects that you seemed to not be happy about when we first revealed them to you. Morgana has a point. Akira pointed out. Yes, the thought about you making explosives was a mixture of emotions. Sana pinched the bridge of her nose in memory to her first reaction of seeing the bombs in action. But I at least can accept that now, after thinking for a bit, that you don't use them outside of your purpose. So if you do sign the contract that Azazel had created, just let me know so I will be able to place an order. I'm not a good shop person but I'll let you know. Akira nodded his head, getting Morgana to whip his head over in the human's direction but didn't say anything. So, judging by your words, I should accept the contract. As long as you keep yourself safe. While I am not exactly pleased to see that you are considering fallen angel offers, I am at least satisfied that you gave me the opportunity and trust to show me such. Sana folded her arms after handing the contract back. Although there is the concern about 4 other people living with you, Rainare, Kala Warner, Middled, and this Vala character. I could say the same, so I'll just see if I can end up refusing that one part of the contract. The human commented, stuffing the papers back into his bag. Looking up at the clock, he looked back at Sana. Looks like class is about to start. Thank you for taking your time to look over the agreement. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you about the issue. Sana stated, watching the boy stand up and walk. But before he opened the door, the girl raised an eyebrow as he turned around. Oh right, we figured out what we're going to do for our celebration and what date it is. Take a break. It took a week. An entire week to be able to map out the entire house. Really, the extent to how large the building was it could be described nearly as a maze. They ended up losing Ryaji for nearly half a day within the walls of their mansion. Within their search for the male blonde, they has discovered a pool, a library, an observatory, a kitchen, their respective bedrooms, and few bathrooms, and something that looked like a combination between a prison and torture chamber of all places. There were other rooms as well, but the idea was pretty much understood. At the entrance as well as various walls of the structure, there had to be maps that showed where the person would be currently and directions to navigate through the place. Due to being too busy with navigation and school as well as their everyday lives, Akira never had the chance to contact Azazel about the contract. But honestly, Akira was in no rush at the moment. Plus, just thinking about Rainare, Kala Warner, and Middled all squirming made him chuckle. The kitchens meanwhile were busy with all of the Phantom Thieves running around and cooking a massive feast. Akira was mainly on the stove with Makoto, Haru, and Asia as they were in charge of cooking the actual food. Yuzuki and Ryaji were preparing the delicacies by chopping meat and vegetables into appropriate sizes. Futaba and Morgana on the other hand were busy calling out directions when the respectable character would say that their current activity would be done. The sound of a doorbell ringing echoed through their ears as Futaba hopped up off her chair. "I'll get it," she called out as she rushed to the door and peeked through the eye-hole. Grabbing the knob, she pulled open the barrier. "You're all here. Come on in." Rias Peerage all accepted the offer as each of them stepped into the housing, with each of them carrying some form of prepared, ready-to-eat food. "Are we late for the celebratory potluck?" Rias asked. "Oh no, you guys are actually here early," Futaba stated, eyeing all of their food with an intense, critical stare. She then stopped at Konako. "What did you bring?" she asked the shorter female. "Fish," Konako stated. For some reason that seems incredibly both appropriate yet inappropriate at the same time. Futaba commented but still stood up. "Follow me to the dining room unless you want to get lost." Issei was carrying looked like a large plate piled with a few steaks as he noticed the large sheet of paper that was the map to the place. "And like that, I completely believe what you're saying," he commented as he looked at the aide. "Seriously, how the hell did you guys end up with a huge place like this? That's for dinner conversation. Now hurry up, the others will be ready soon." Futaba jumped a couple of times before leading the way. "This place is certainly grand. How fitting for the Phantom Thieves?" Akeno admired the interior decorating. Akeno's right. Kiba had to agree as there was a big bowl of salad on his person. "There is a charming atmosphere this place gives off." "Really? I couldn't tell." Futaba shrugged her shoulders as she stepped into another room. "And here we are. The dining room. Just put your food down and wait for the others." "Well, they don't need to wait long," Haru commented as she came walking to the table with a smile and a platter of raw vegetables. Putting it down, she looked at everyone. "We're just finishing up before we can all get together to eat. So while waiting, help yourself to some vegetables. I grew them from the greenhouse in the Kuoh garden." Curiously, the Occult Research Club each took a piece and nibble on the bit in front of them. This is impressive from just the raw vegetable alone." Rias nodded, definitely impressed with the taste. "I'm glad you like it." Haru giggled as each of their reactions were pretty good in her opinion. Once again, the doorbell rang. "Oh, could that be Satrai-san with her own peerage?" "I got it," Akira said as he swiftly passed through the group while placing a pot full of soup onto the table before walking out of the room. Hearing an amused sigh, everyone in the dining room turned to see the rest of the humans and cat walk in with their own meals for everyone for the potluck and set them down. "It's nice to see that we're all together, just about to eat and talk," Anne commented. "So, Issei, what did you bring?" "Ah, just some steaks," the brunette answered before looking a bit sheepish. "Though I just helped season it and all since my mom did most of the cooking." "It's okay, Issei." Asia smiled gently. "I'm sure that it will taste good with the effort you helped put into it." "Asia-chan is right," Haru added. "Seasoning is an important part of cooking after all. So if we find it delicious, you should know that you played a big role in its taste, Icon." The brunette stared at Haru for a couple of seconds before blushing a bit. "Icon," he mumbled. "No one's ever called me that before." "How about Ike?" Futaba asked from the side, grabbing the attention while sitting down, poking one of Konako's cheeks. "You know, because he's part of the perverted trio." "Agreed." Konako nodded while poking Futaba back. "Aw, come on guys," Ryaji said, patting Issei's back to console the boy who was the target for attention whether it be good or bad. "I'm pretty sure you're all embarrassing him right now. No need to bully him at the moment." "Then let's talk about you, Ryaji," Anne commented. Era, what to say about Ryaji-kun?" Akeno mischievously said, seeming to go with the flow of Anne comment. "He's certainly a hard-headed individual," Yuzuki stated. "Wait, what?" the blonde male exclaimed. "Not cool, man. Looks like you all are enjoying yourselves. Sana stated as she began walking into the room followed by her peerage as Akira was leading them. You're right, we did arrive just on time. Put your food on the table and let's each find a spot to sit. Akira suggested as that's what everyone did. Pulling up chairs to sit down, everyone found their own spots as they got comfortable. With glasses of their choice of drink at the ready, Akira soon stood up. Before we eat, let me just say this. Everyone fell silent, waiting for the leader of the Phantom Thieves to speak. Clearing his throat, he soon spoke. Screw long speeches. Here's to our future and the friendship that will come. Cheers. Everyone said with a smile, some being much louder than others. That night was filled with laughter, amusement, and a good time they would never forget that brought them all closer. Yeah, I think I just dug myself a bit of a grave with that bit about Vala living with the Phantom Thieves as well as Rainaray, Kala Warner, and Middle being maids. In the middle of writing this chapter though, I realized it was completely stupid and a bad idea maybe. So I won't be doing it actually now that I think about it mid-typing in this little paragraph. Well, next chapter let's put in. Just cut myself off from spoiling you the next chapter about. Oh. I almost did it again. I know this chapter was terrible, didn't go anywhere, and the story is getting a bit worse, but trust me. I hope I can just get those bonding and introduction bit out of the way eventually and move on to some more stuff you all may like. If you all can tell, there was a bit of inspiration from King of the Fake World in this chapter. I hope my ass isn't on the grinder for this. No flames please. 913 Chapter 13. I do not own the Persona series or High School DxD. Everything belongs to their respected owners. Akira blinked the sleep out of his eyes as he felt stiff and something on his chest. Groaning, he attempted to move but the weight was planted firmly and didn't want to move. Closing his eyes with a slightly irritated sigh. That was when it all began to rush back to him. No, he did not drink any sort of alcohol during the celebration. None of them were even at the legal drinking age anyways. But that still didn't help the fact that he felt a bit of a combination between groggy and dizzy. He wondered how in the world he had those effects on him right now considering all he knew was that he had a lack of sleep. Resting his head on the arm of the couch he was resting on, he craned his skull around to try and get a better look of his surroundings. Somehow, many people had moved from the dining room to the lounging/lobby area. The place was littered with the prone forms of everyone sitting on chairs, on the floor with blankets and pillows covering and supporting them, some just sprawled out on the table as well. Hearing another groan, he couldn't help but wince as Sana used his stomach to support her hand that was pushing her upwards as she began to wake up. Rubbing her eyes that were behind her glasses, she saw that she had been using Akira as a pillow as she frowned. She groaned. She then looked over at Akira and around her with a frown before sighing. So all of that wasn't a dream. Such a ridiculous thing did happen. The black-haired boy opened his mouth, but then heard movement. Watching the floor, one body managed to come to life as Issei was the one getting up shakily. What happened? Issei moaned while rubbing his head to rid himself of a headache. The Big Bang, dinosaurs, bips, and an amounting sense of futility. Akira deadpanned. Well. More recently, Sana winced as he looked around. We all moved over to the lounging area since we finished eating. Ryaji-san was complimenting you, Issei-san, but then smacked you back a little too hard on the back. That sent you stumbling to Futaba-san. You used your hands to try and stop, but then ended up grabbing Futaba-san's breasts. Konako-san then punched Issei-san hard which caused An-san, Yuzuki-san, Ryaji-san, Kiba-san, Asia-san, and several other of my peerage members to be knocked down unconscious along with me. You then ended up groping Akeno-san and Ria's breasts and Issei fainted soon with a bit of blood coming out of his nose. That happened. Sana finished. Take a break. No sun could be seen behind the gray veil of clouds that polluted the afternoon sky with their dreadful gray forms. They hung like a bad omen over the normally sunny and upbeat town. However, it seemed that those sunny days were merely a distant memory, as the gray masses just seemed to stretch for hours. With the clouds so gray, it was only a matter of time before it would begin to rain. On the ground, Haru looked up at the gray sky with a bag in hand as she was leaving the grounds of Kuoh Academy. The forecast yesterday said that today was supposed to be sunny, but it seemed to be a case of error. Mentally commenting about how it was sunny just a few hours ago, she nearly ended up bumping into a familiar face. His silver hair was definitely something that was unforgettable after all. Even his clothing made the male stand out a bit. "Ah, Vala-kun, it's nice to see you again." She nodded her head in a greeting. "Haru Okumura, if I'm not mistaken," Vala stated, looking up and down the girl to see that she was still in her uniform. "I've been looking for you, Phantom Thieves. Since you're the first one, I guess you can pass on this message to your leader." The boy folded his arms while resting against a wall. "Azazel is wondering what your leader's answer is to his contract." "Oh, Akira-chan hasn't sent it yet?" Haru asked, silently getting an answer from one look on Vala's face. "Well, I suppose that there isn't any address to return the papers to privately either." She then returned a polite smile. "Why don't you follow me back to our place, that way you can pick it up and deliver it yourself?" Vala stared at Haru. This girl was far too trusting in his opinion. Unless it was just him, since he's only been around her for almost an equivalent of an hour total, and that was with and without close interactions. Very well, that would perhaps be for the best. "Okay, then follow me." Haru gestured with her free arm as she began to lead the male around the streets. "So is there anything you are doing at the moment, Vala-kun? Attending college? Maybe university? Do you have a job?" "I train," Vala stated curtly. "Ah, okay." Haru nodded her head, as if unaware of his tone. That means that you can fight. Do you have any hobbies?" "No." "I see." Haru answered. "What does Azazel have you do?" "Nothing." "All right then." Now Haru's expression fell a bit, knowing that Vala wasn't exactly keeping his answers open. Although she supposed she couldn't blame him. Perhaps Vala just didn't want to talk much about his private life. She then looked up to see a familiar building. "Ah, we're here." Walking on the stone path, Haru fumbled around until she managed to fish the key out of her pocket. Unlocking the door, she stepped in first. "Come on in, remember to wipe your feet before taking your shoes off, and just take a seat on one of those couches. I have to give Akira-chan a call about the contract." Vala did as he was told as he watched Haru walk off with bags in tow. Looking around, he noticed that the Phantom Thieves had kept this place rather well tidy. Since it was tidy, it made him notice that there weren't really any pictures of them or relatives around. It could just be a teenager thing or something similar, but it was a detail that for some reason stood out to Vala. And here we are. Haru came walking in with a platter of 2 coffee mugs filled with the steaming brown liquid and papers folded under her arm. "I also made us some coffee if you wanted some. It would be nice to drink something while looking over any details about the contract you may think will be an issue, so that Azazel-san won't have to deal with them." Vala just gave her a straight look as he took the contract from her and began rummaging through the pages. Patiently, he knew that he would have to go through this carefully. Even though he wouldn't be the one providing benefits, he still wouldn't want to leave too early, or else Azazel would perhaps tease him about not having enough time to stare at this Haru girl. Although if he spent a long time in this household, he could be teased about staring at the girl for too long. In basic terms, he was stuck in a crossroad of bullshit. Unconsciously taking a sip of coffee, he read the papers. Line by line, word by word, letter by letter, he processed it all. Some of it he schemed, but then his eyes would be careful when important parts came up. Coming up on one part though, he looked back up to Haru. You all agree to refuse the condition of housing those 3 fallen angels and I. Well, it wasn't a very good idea in the first place. Haru looked up in thought before saying her words carefully. If this person was highly trusted by Azazel, and liked to train apparently, it was probably a good idea to not get on Vala's bad side. We are all fine on our own. Apart from the issue of cleaning, everything else is fine enough for us to not need any servant of sorts. Not only that, but it just seemed unfair for you to be forced away from your home just like that. There was no way we all would agree to do that. Vala only settled for staring at Haru. Considering how powerful they were, he was almost sure that they would agree to at least take the maid part of the deal since they may be busy with other things already. Plus, her explanation was pretty logical at the same time. I see. Was all he could say. I suppose you have my thanks for denying such a request. Haru giggled in response. You're welcome. She nodded her head with a small smile. The heiress then gestured to Vala. Would you like some more coffee? Looking down, Vala realized that he was holding an empty mug. Take a break. It was supposed to be a regular day, but then it suddenly turned sour. All of the Occult Research Club members were lined up inside the room. Asia may not have been a member, but she stuck close to Issei like glue just like she did with N due to her concern and being close to the brunette. Issei was standing behind one of the couches, standing right next to Asia. Forming a small line with them were both Konako and Kiba. Their faces were straight, but the brunette could see the bitterness in their features. Rias was sitting at her desk with an extremely displeased look on her face. Akeno was standing by the desk, her usual smile gracing her face, but it was quite obvious that wasn't happy as well. On the opposite couch opposite of the club and their guest was a young man in his early 20s. Their hair was short and blonde while their eyes were dark blue. He wore a burgundy blazer with gold embroidery on the right. Pants matched his outfit while black dress shoes covered his feet. Underneath his top though was a white dress shirt that was not fully buttoned, giving a view of his muscular chest. Not only that, but there were so many girls behind that blonde male as well. An assortment was perhaps a better term to describe it. There were all kinds of girls ranging from those in maid costumes, cat girls, twins, a Maiko, the list just went on. Issei did not like him. Mainly because of the fact that the man was pretty much flaunting about the fact that he had a harem and Issei didn't. While the brunette did wish to have his own harem as well, it was the fact that the man was so open about it. It seemed that he wasn't the only one in that boat though, considering how everyone else seemed not too pleased at the sudden appearance and how the man just welcomed himself. State why you are here, Riser Fenix. Rias spoke, her tone proving not to be pleasant at all. The name was spoken with disdain and some disgust as well to fill the room and the building around them. You have entered my territory without the proper escort. Grafia was supposed to take you here but you arrived without her. What? No hello? Not even anything to offer? The man asked with a small smirk, cracking one eye open to look at Rias. Is this how you greet your guests, Rias? His question was clearly filled with mockery. Everyone, including Riser's group, turned to look at Rias. The red-haired female's eyes were closed and her arms were folded. She had been like that since Issei had walked through the door. He didn't know if something happened beforehand or if there was something behind this. What he did know though was that Rias did not like this blonde-haired person. Oh come now, no need to act like that. Riser walked over to the desk Rias was using as a shield to keep them apart. Clearly it was a weak barrier. I just came early to inform you that the date had been decided. Now, while I know it's a little sudden, though we could go visit the location the ceremony is taking place in. I've already told you, Riser, I have no intention of marrying you. Everyone practically heard the sound of Issei's jaw hitting the ground. Kiba and Konako looked away. Akeno frowned. Asia was confused by the entire manner, but managed to bring Issei back to reality by pushing the boy's jaw back up. Married. What the hell is going on? Kuoh, who the hell is this guy? All eyes turned to Issei. Who are you? Riser asked, looking at Issei as if he were foreign. I'm Issei Hyudu, the brunette introduced himself. Pon, I'm Kuoh's. He immediately paused as he thought about what he said for a couple of seconds. I mean, I'm Kuoh's Pon. Way to go, Ike. Konako deadpanned from the side. That explains so much. Riser added with the same kind of delivery and bland tone. He then turned to Rias. I'm surprised you didn't tell your servant about me. Though I shouldn't be surprised. I can sense a bit of humanity left on him, so that must make him a reincarnated devil. I didn't say anything because there was no need to tell them about you. Rias' words jabbed the man, but had no effect. Riser only smiled. You're as harsh as usual, I see. Perhaps I should humor your pawn. He then turned over towards Issei. I am the pure blood, high-class devil, and third son of the legendary Phoenix family. I should also mention that I'm Ria's fiancé. Fiancé. Both Issei and Asia exclaimed with surprise and shock. Enough, Riser. Ria slammed her hands onto the desk as she glared at the blonde man standing before her. If looks could kill, Riser would have been dead before he even had a chance to utter his last name. I've already told you, I'm not going to marry you. You say that like you have a choice. Riser sounded amused, but there was a hint of steel in his voice. Even his features fell a little in a serious presentation. We both know there isn't much we can do. Both our families have already decided on this and the contract's been written up. Don't forget that your family has been just as hasty to unite our two houses. Don't speak so presumptuously. Rias narrowed her eyes. As the heir to the Gremory family, I am the one who will decide who gets to be my partner. Regardless of that, I was already promised that I would be allowed to do as I pleased until I graduate from a university in the human world. I fear you don't quite understand the situation, Rias, my dear. Riser replied back with snide yet kept his face in the same position. Your parents fear your household may go extinct. In the previous Great War, many factions lost their lives and numbers, which includes numbers of households. It's only natural that our parents would struggle to protect our pure blood and household by joining together. The offspring of two high-ranking, pure-blooded devils is invaluable. It is needed if the survival of the originals is to continue on to the future. I do understand the situation at hand. Rias answered. But your intentions are not what you speak of. She folded her arms over her chest. I plan on siring an heir when I'm ready. Her eyes sharpened like blades as she glared at Riser. But I won't marry you. I'll marry someone of my own choosing. Even the heirs of old households have that much of a right. The blonde sighed, his fingers twitching in agitation. You know, Rias, like you, I am a pure-blooded devil of an old household. I bear the powerful name of Phoenix. I can't let that name be tarnished. I came all the way out here to the human world to talk to you, and I don't like such a place very much. His eyes narrowed. I've been patient with you, but I can see that words and the future of devils is something you take too lightly. Enough. Rias glared now. This conversation is over until Grafia arrives. Remember that you're in Gremory territory. You entered unscheduled and without permission. While giving her reasoning, Riser frowned. I can send you away just as easily as I can invite you in. Riser, with his narrowed eyes, looked over to the girls that were right behind him. His peerage kept their silence, but their expressions and postures were almost at the ready for anything he would order them to do. But then he sighed with a smirk as if Rias' words were a joke. Very well, we'll wait for the maid. He laid his head back on the couch. As if it were a play, on cue, there was a sudden knock on the door. Come in. Rias answered, trying to hold back a sigh. The door opened to reveal Haru, who was carrying a couple of bags. One was for her school work, but the other was made of plastic, seeming to be holding a couple of vegetables such as a carrot and lettuce, for example. It was odd, since the girl would usually be around the greenhouse on the school grounds or be going back home to get ready for the rest of her day. Haru-san. Rias blinked, almost forgetting about Riser. Why are you here? The female blinked. Looking around, she noticed the tense atmosphere. Nobody looking like they wanted to talk about it, but she kept a slightly concerned look on her face as she avoided the conversation. I'm just here to drop off some veggies for Kiba-chan since he asked if he could have some. Haru answered. Not only that, but I also came to see if Asia-chan wanted to go home early. Although I don't think that may be the best time now. The first-year college student was already handing the plastic bag over to Kiba as she became the center of attention in the room. Riser, however, was the first to break the silence. Not bad at all, he commented as he stared at Haru. Standing up, he walked over to where Haru was standing. As she watched eyes travel, Haru turned her head and ended up seeing Riser suddenly in front of her. Hello. Haru greeted slowly. Who are you? She asked, unsure if that was even a correct question. Are you a devil like Rias-chan and her peerage? My name is Riser Phoenix of the Phoenix clan. It is a pleasure to meet you. Riser took Haru's hand and held it up. And you are indeed correct. I am a devil. Since you asked that question, could I assume that you are human? Fortunately for Haru, the blonde only made a kiss noise when his lips were an inch away from the back of her hand. The female still did not appreciate the gesture though. If you are willing, I would like to invite you to my manor to be able to give you some private lessons on my kind. It would be a great pleasure of mine. Haru's eyes narrowed slightly, having a good idea what this man was implying. She heard Asia gasping with shock as Issei was pretty much choking in outrage. Even other members of the occult research club seemed to disapprove greatly of Riser's words. Despite them only spending about one night together, it was a night that none of the Phantom Thieves, Sana's peerage and even Ria's peerage would never be able to forget. Within the span of one meal at less than a day had they created a friendship and almost understood what each person was like. I'm afraid I do not understand. Haru decided to feign ignorance, hoping to give the man a chance to understand what he was doing. Well, Riser chuckled. You will when we share a bed dash. He was cut off by an enraged Issei and angry Asia, who punched the blonde right on the cheek while the latter threw a cabbage square at Riser's face. Everyone gawked at Issei's action, but then to see Asia even do something like that was absolutely shocking. Don't talk to Haru like that, Asia exclaimed. You bastard. How dare you dash? Issei was about to continue, but then Haru managed to stop him. Ai-chan. She shouted a bit loudly, placing her hands on both shoulders of the brunette. That managed to stop the brunette in his tracks. While I do appreciate you protecting me, you shouldn't just approach the situation with violence. She scolded the boy. What if this were an important meeting? If one were to attack the other out of anger, who knows what consequences would occur? But dash. Issei was about to protest, but then cut himself off as he looked up at Haru's eyes. Keeping his mouth open, it suddenly became dry as he tried to find the words to say. At that moment, he looked down. Sorry, he mumbled. Haru gently patted his head. It's okay, as long as you learned your lesson. The same goes for you too, Asia-chan. Her last sentence was directed the female blonde, who acknowledged it with a nod. At that moment, a red magic circle and a faint red light appeared near the clubroom door. A few seconds later, a newcomer was left standing where the circle had been. The newcomer was a beautiful young woman that had a freezing aura around her. The woman was the second tallest in the room. She had silver hair with 2 braids and silver eyes that always looked like they were in focus. She wore maid outfit that was the color blue, even complete with the white headdress. The newcomer bowed. "Pardon my lateness and lack of presence, Aja-sama," the lady said. "I was unaware of Riser-sama's early presence, so I was forced to wait until I had my suspicions." Ria smiled. "That's fine, Grafia," she replied with politeness. "Besides, we wouldn't even consider starting this meeting without you." While talking, she shot a glare at Riser, who was still standing and staring daggers at Issei and Asia. The blonde male silently, however, went back to his seat. "Once again, my apologies," Grafia said before glancing at Haru. "Pardon me, Aja-sama, but who is this girl?" She tilted her head in the heiress direction. "Ah, hello." Haru bowed, feeling like she should be polite. Then again, that was her personality in general. "My name is Haru Okumura, it's nice to meet you." Grafia turned to get a full look at Haru before bowing herself. "It is also a pleasure to meet you myself," she said before straightening up again. "Am I to assume that you will be present during this meeting?" she finished. Haru blinked. "What exactly is this meeting?" she asked curiously. "The marriage between Aja-sama and Riser-sama, or course?" Grafia elaborated. "Could you perhaps start from the beginning?" Haru asked. Grafia, with Ria's permission, soon began to explain what had happened. But Haru pretty much understood it all and was able to put it into simple terms. The Phoenix family had set up an arranged marriage between him and Rias, with her family's approval, in an attempt to unite the two to preserve the bloodline of pure-blooded devils. "But that's not right," Haru soon said after a period of silence, taking the time to process the information. "Rias-chan should marry whom she loves, not be forced into something like this." "Do her parents not care about what she wants? What she thinks? What about her feelings?" Grafia was silent, but her face twitched. It was as if she was coming up with an answer or couldn't give one at all. Everyone stared at Haru as Rias blinked. I didn't expect you react like that. As if it were personal," she said slowly. The redhead soon thought up of something else. "Did something happen that was similar to this?" "In a way. It's a shame if you would have to marry someone that you don't love or even want to marry," Haru said quietly. Remember her own former fiancé? She remembered how she was used just for what her own parent wanted. Sure, there may be a difference between her arranged marriage and Rias. But she couldn't help but compare the two situations. It was not right. Especially with this kind of a man Rias was to marry. Haru already got a good impression of what Riser was like with him just advancing on her within seconds. Even with what seemed to be his entire peerage behind him as well at the same time. Rias nodded and kept her ground. "I couldn't agree more," she stated before folding her arms. "So, there won't be a wedding," she stated firmly before pointing at Riser. "I'm not marrying you, Riser." At first, Riser was patient, trying to convince Rias to marry him. Then came irritation since trying to stay calm was clearly not working. But now, after being hit by a cabbage of all things and almost ignored for a long time, he couldn't help but show his annoyance. "Don't be so selfish, Rias," Riser stated with a dismissive wave and irritated sigh. "You know this is for the betterment of devils everywhere." "Betterment of devils?" Haru asked, slightly frowning at Riser's current attitude and tone. "You don't seem to even believe in those words yourself." "It is for the betterment, human." Riser glared at the heiress. "The less of reincarnated, low-class scum we have running around the better," he snapped harshly with his gaze looking over at Issei. "We both come from famous pillars, Rias and I, pillars that have standards to uphold." "But," Haru took a deep breath, "those can't be the last pure-blooded devil clans," she pointed out. "And I also don't think that she would even want to be in the same room with you, much less bear a child of yours. She was surprised with her own small insult, but she couldn't help but release a bit of frustration. Everyone else in the room remained silent as the devil heir and human bantered back and forth. Reiser's eyebrow twitched, losing his patience much quicker than anticipated. Then it's considered political. Reiser shrugged, the stiff movement and tone proved that he was becoming very annoyed. There's nothing wrong with that, right? If the clans come together, it would be considered the strongest in the underworld. And that would prove? Haru inquired, looking down to have her bangs shadow her eyes. Reiser was officially pissed at Haru's comment as his fist slammed down on the table. His face was twisted with rage. Stop being such a bitch. He snarled, words dripping with venom. I'm at my wit's end here with you, a human no less. What the hell are you even here for? This is between devils. Not a weak race such as yourself. So vulgar. Reiser, unable to contain it after hearing those words, lashed out angrily by flinging a concentrated ball of fire at Haru before anyone could react. It all happened as if it were slow motion. The heat was intense as it traveled over to the heiress. It was almost as if it took its time to travel. Moment by moment passed until it finally arrived close enough to Haru. But it never reached her. A large, black fur fan with a pink and yellow base blocked the massive amount of flames with what seemed to be little effort. Some kind of energy was being projected around the fan as well. It was like it was some kind of blue, psychic energy that was keeping the ball of fire in place. What was holding the hand though was a large construct wearing a black and pink Victorian-style dress, with red and pink vertical striped puffs on the dress that extended to its elbows while wearing pink gloves. Underneath the dress was a white pinstripe blouse that revealed a bit of cleavage with a light blue neck choker around her neck. The bottom of the dress was in a pink color with golden trim around the dress, which had a golden lip on the center of the dress that made it resemble a smiling face. There were black and red curtains around the dress underneath. With a pink heart-shaped frill around its waist, the accessory was accompanied by a red bow tied on the drapes and a knife next to on the center of the heart-shaped frill. What was extremely bizarre of the sudden summon, apart from its large size taking up a fair amount of room, was that it had no head. Instead, the face was replaced with a pink mask inserted with yellow eyes that was being held up by a stick in its free hand. Looking up, Haru revealed that she was glaring. Her usual sweet look was replaced with poisonous eyes. Reiser stood up quickly as he looked like he was ready to fight it. But as he did, he saw the fireball he had thrown be sent back right towards him. Raising his arms, he defended himself from the damage and glared. "What is that?" he asked angrily, already having enough of today. Haru couldn't answer as she felt a surge of agony pass through her brain and fell to the floor. She couldn't help but release grunts of pain. Hissing through her teeth, one hand clutched her head while the other attempted to support her. "It seems you are in quite the predicament again. My dear, fated princess. It can talk." Issei recoiled back with surprise as the voice of the persona could be heard among all members of the room. "The freedom you have worked for has grown from the stem of betrayal. So, this is what a persona sounds like." Rias commented from the side, getting a look from Graphia. "But, it kind of sounds like Haru-san. Does that mean personas can talk but they sound like the actual person? The state you had yearned for. You have finally achieved such." Everybody wanted to react. Rias' peerage wanted to move to protect Haru. Reiser's peerage wanted to attack since this was an anomaly. But then they couldn't. They all were absolutely paralyzed with amazement and fear. But what now? What will you do next? Panting over and over again, she swallowed. "My decision has been set in stone. Tempered in fire. You should already know," Haru stated as her head snapped up, revealing her pupils to be an eerie yellow. "Yes, that gaze. I can finally display my true strength once more." She was slow, but Haru got back up. Stumbling, her body regained its strength it once had before. But now, there was more power running through her. Her brows were furrowed. Her pupils narrowed in a defying glare. Her lips lowered into a frown. With such a look, it was almost suffocating to nearly everyone watching her as she took her time to stand up straight. I am thou, thou art I. Let us adorn your freedom as a dedicated defender. With a flourish of her hands and the construct, rose petal began to surround both her and her persona. The tornado of red completely blocked a vision anyone had on her. But within just a second, the crimson color was gone as fast as it had appeared. Immediately as soon as they had sight though, Haru had somehow been changed into her phantom thief clothing. She wore a dark purple cavalier hat with a feather plume trucked into a Tyrian purple hatband. On her body was a long-sleeved pale pink blouse with a cravat and a black corset vest with gold detailing that had a hole to show the size of her average chest. Bloomers matched her hatband along with black pantyhose, a holster belt carrying ammunition, and lace-up pumps with a pair of violet gloves. The persona's dress meanwhile opened up and revealed a red, metal plate that had the same smile outline as the dress. But then it opened again and revealed an array of ranged weaponry, including 2 Gatling guns, a rocket launcher, and a missile already ready for deployment as they all popped out with the sound of the items being loaded. Oh! Issei exclaimed as he covered his crotch in shock. I do not expect you to come to any of my reasoning at all. Haru started, pinching the brim of her hat while closing her eyes and looking down. Not only that, but she wasn't even looking in Riser's direction. But I can't just allow my friend, Rias-chan, to marry such a selfish person such as yourself. Riser only watched as Haru began to point at him sharply, still keeping one hand on her hat. You won't have much say once I incinerate you. You can try to. Haru nodded. But just try and see how much of a difficult time you will have with me. Sliding her finger and thumb along the brim of her hat, her hands were suddenly on a firearm as a giant axe had appeared out of thin air just like what she was equipped with. She held in her hands Yagrush, a grenade launcher made from the great bale. It was the perfect size for her as if sat perfectly in her hands and was not too heavy either. The magazine was like a revolver chamber but a lot more massive and bulky for such projectiles. Such an object was fitted perfectly against a barrel as it had iron sights that was provided. Her hands were on the wooden handles that were behind the ammunition drum and bottom of the barrel. There was even a wooden stock to provide support. But what made the weapon really stand out was the almost hellfire aesthetic it provided despite its deadly power. On her back was Fleurs du Mal, the ominous tool created from the persona of Beelzebub. Its black color was as if it had been made out of darkness. The battle axe held twisted designs. The look wasn't exactly helping it as it seemed to shine like obsidian. The large, sharpened ends were ominous, just waiting for its next victim. It almost screamed out for an opponent to fight, something to clash against to test its strength. It looked so heavy, but Haru managed to carry it with a bit of effort. To my aid, milady. And like that, we have another chapter. Yes, there were ideas taken from Ratha Winsra's story of Flower Amongst Devils. Fuck me. Actually, please don't. About Riser though. Despite almost all the DXD crossovers showing that he's a dick, yes, I can agree with you. But the way I portrayed Riser, if I did any kind of portrayal, I've always seen him like that. Sure, he can be arrogant and a playboy, but he is also concerned for the future of devils. Just marrying Rias is overshadowing that fact. I hope you all enjoyed this chapter. No flames please.